August 8th, and this is a Geeknights special.
Hooray!
What does it mean to be a Geeknights special? It means it's a short episode without all the trappings of Geeknights, meaning it's not really an episode of Geeknights.
The reason is we're not here.
See, we were at Otakon this previous weekend, and for this whole week we were on the Jersey Shore, and possibly maybe in Atlantic City, and at a bunch of places doing a whole bunch of stuff.
And that means we can't record anything, or we can't record a real episode.
Well, actually, we're recording a whole ton of stuff, probably right now, but we're not going to be able to upload any of it.
So, as a result, we have pre-recorded the following for you.
You see, whenever we're going to be out of town, or for whatever reason we can't do an episode, we always make up for it with some Geek Night specials, which are free format, we talk until we run out of something to talk about, funny little stories, and whatnot. So if you're new to Geek Nights, which I'm sure a lot of you are, because I'm sure a lot of you have found us as a result of Otakon, find any episode anywhere on the site or in our feed in iTunes that does not have the word special in the title to get a feel for what our show actually is.
Yep. All right, now, in this little special, we're going to tell this story about Penguicon 2.0, which we attended many years ago.
And it probably is still in my list of conventions I've gone to in the top 5 of greatest cons ever.
Yeah, well, instances of cons. I mean, the
Yes.
convention as a whole, I can't really comment because I've only been to it once. But anyway, part of the reason I'm telling this story is because there's a guy who does the Board Games To Go podcast, Mark Johnson, and he used to sorta kinda work for Steve Jackson, kinda. He did a little podcast about it, so you can go listen to that at boardgamestogo.com. And you know, the story involves Steve Jackson, so I informed him that the story exists, and this is a perfect opportunity to tell that story so he can be entertained by it, and hopefully everyone else will also be entertained by the story.
So, on a whim, I went to Penguicon.
We went to Penguicon 2.0, which is primarily a Linux convention in Novi, Michigan, which is right near Detroit.
Yeah, it's basically like a borough of Detroit.
Yeah.
Think of it that way.
But it was a hotel con, which is primarily about Linux, but they also had lots of gaming. They also had PC gaming. They had, let's see, not so much anime. A lot of
Chaos.
sci-fi, fantasy, sword fighting, kind of Renaissance action. You know, a bit general geek con.
One interesting note is that this convention had a perk that I've never had at any other convention where I wasn't staff. Anyone who had a badge to Penguicon was entitled to an infinite amount of free beer or free hard cider for the entire weekend.
As long as you weren't already very intoxicated, they would continue to give it to you.
Which was somewhat interesting. I've never experienced that at a con before.
Yeah, and you know, it's pretty crazy to hang out in like this small hotel, relatively small hotel, and you got people in there like Neil Gaiman and shit. And it was pretty crazy.
Now, I went kind of on a whim because I had a huge project. A project of the order of magnitude of...
Yeah, this was in the college days, so he had a school project.
If Rim doesn't finish this, Rim does not graduate. And it was due, like, the next week, like Tuesday. And I also didn't have enough money to go to the con, but I eventually decided to go anyway. And we all crammed into Alex's minivan. We had a wireless network in the minivan that was actually online through a cell phone.
Through Canada.
And we drove all the way through Canada. I showed everyone a Big Boy's Diner. And there's a picture of us fondling the big boy. And then we made our way to Novi for this convention, which I don't think we ever covered the convention as a whole.
No, but we're only going to tell one story from the convention.
Yeah, we have many stories from this con.
Now, the main story from this convention is that when we got there, things are pretty slow. We got there pretty early, and you know, unlike other conventions, it wasn't already zooming away as soon as it opened. You know, it was pretty toned down on Friday. So we decided to break out Puerto Rico and play Puerto Rico in the hotel lobby.
So we're playing, and this dude walks over, this older dude.
And he's kind of scary looking. Like, he's got, you know, he's black, dark hair, little scary goatee.
I wouldn't say scary. I'd say he just looked like a gamer.
Yeah. But, you know,
Unless you're
gamers are scarier than the average doofus.
Well, yeah, I'll agree to that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And
he wasn't like a frightening holy crap guy.
He walks over and he's like, "Hey, Puerto Rico, I've always wanted to play that game. It looks good."
And we're just paying attention to the game like, yeah, Puerto Rico, this is like the best game ever.
Like, we barely even look up at the guy.
Barely. And then like a few, you know, he walks away. He's like, maybe I could play it sometime.
And
we're like, yeah, sure.
We're like, yeah, well, anytime we're around free, we'll play a game with you.
Yep. It's like, oh, cool. Then like a few minutes later, you know, some guy comes over and he's like, oh, I think that's Steve Jackson. We're like, what? And apparently, the guy who came over and talked to us about Puerto Rico was Steve Jackson. And he did not make that known, but someone else knew it was him.
Yep. And
if you don't know, Steve Jackson is the guy who runs Steve Jackson Games. They make games like Illuminati, Munchkin, etc. That's who he is.
Yeah.
In case you don't know who he is.
And he wanted to play Puerto Rico with us.
Yeah, GURPS. He also makes GURPS.
Now, in addition to that, he brought this thing to the con, Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to cover it in detail, but he basically gave everyone a pile of components of a marble machine. You know those machines where it pulls a marble to the top and then the marble goes down a bunch of stuff and makes it to the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
He brought enough stuff to make an infinite, like a massive one, just a pile of stuff. And he left it in a room, and his instructions were go nuts. We spent much of the con going nuts.
We did indeed. Now, a little later, we saw him again, and we were like, hey, now that we know who you are, we kind of want to play Puerto Rico with you, hey. And, even though we were being kind of doofusy, annoying fanboys, he was just like, yeah, cool, we'll play it, at this time.
Yeah, we were like, Sunday, like right before we leave, we'll play.
Mm-hmm.
Now, independent of all this, our friend James was pining after Lisa at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he pretty much spent the entire convention carrying his laptop around on the wireless network, just pouncing to make sure anytime she was online, he talked to her. To the exclusion of talking to any of us or doing anything with us.
Or doing anything at the convention, really. I mean, he would go to some panels at the convention, and he'd pay attention to the panel and his computer.
Yep. And then Sunday, for various reasons, he decided that we had to get out of Detroit and back to Rochester as soon as possible, and he wanted to leave at the crack of dawn.
And we were like, oh, no, this convention's awesome. We kind of want to hang around.
Yeah.
And we want to play Puerto Rico with Steve Jackson.
Yeah. I don't know what actually convinced us to go back early. Because no one wanted to go back except him.
Yeah, we should have stayed.
Yeah, for some reason, we ended up going back early. And as a result, we missed playing Puerto Rico with Steve Jackson.
I think the final deal he made with us is that we would help him clean up the chaos, and then he would play Puerto Rico with us.
Yeah, we were all set to do that.
And he had never played Puerto Rico before. We were going to show him the amazingness of Puerto Rico, and we could have influenced future Steve Jackson game designs, and who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe this would have been the Steve Jackson podcast.
Steve Jackson finally makes an awesome game that's not just random. No, some of his games are fun, but they're not hardcore, super German games.
Yeah, Illuminati is probably the closest, all things considered.
Yep. But yeah, that's the story of us almost playing Puerto Rico.
See, this
with
was
Steve Jackson.
This was also in kind of our earlier days of going to cons, where we were
and our earlier days of German board gaming.
Yeah, we weren't so hip to how to make a con awesome, so we didn't stand our ground and say, "Screw you, James. We're gonna stay and do all this fun stuff."
Mm-hmm.
Now you should see in the forum we have a private thread for all the front row crew who are actually going to Otakon. The sheer amount of planning and rules and dictation that has gone on as to what's going on. Like, you will show up at the hotel at this time. You will pay me this money before you get into the door. You are liable to pay regardless of whether or not you arrive at the con, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't stand for any delay or any problems when we go to conventions now.
Yeah, and pretty much if anyone screws up, they're not allowed back with us.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is kind of cool. We've had people over the years who have heard about how smoothly our con experience goes. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, there are people, because generally I don't think anyone in our group has screwed up yet.
No, we've never.
Not royally enough to be kicked out of the group.
We have never told someone they were not welcome to come back to a con with us.
Yeah, yet. But we would if you screwed up badly enough. But the point is that other people are, go to cons with other groups of people, and those groups of people screw up and their con experience is diminished as a result. And some of those people who are awesome and they hate the fact that the group they go to the con with sucks, they've come over to our group and been like, hooray!
Yeah, we're not going to mention names, but one of them actually said, like, they were saying all the horrible things that were going on in the room. Drama and people fighting and didn't have enough money and the room cost more than they expected and blah, blah, blah. And then they came and hung out in our room for a bit and they said something to the effect of, wow, I should just stay with you guys. And then I said,
yes, you should.
You know what? Any number of people can stay with us. We can get as many rooms as we need. We have a crazy party every year, and it's always awesome.
Indeed.
The problem is now our crew, if it weren't for the fact that some people who went last year can't make it this year, we would have needed all 3 rooms.
Yep. Anyway, so also at Penguicon 2.0, as a side note, I saw Mayfair Games was there, which I didn't realize until much too late in the convention. And a guy from Mayfair Games taught us how to play Tigris and Euphrates.
And it was fantastic.
It was indeed fantastic.
And I like how he seemed to pick on the fact that we were really into board gaming. Or
yeah, it's like we went over and they were sitting at a table with a giant Settler set. You know, now you can go buy that giant Settler set for like $200.
This was the prototype of that.
Yeah, they had it on a table and they were playing it. And I was like, whoa, I'll buy that for $100. And they were like, no, not enough. And I'm like, oh, then it's not worth it, but it's still awesome. And they were like, thanks. And then we walked over to the table full of games to find a game to play. And we picked up Tigris and Euphrates because I had heard it was a great classic game and we had never played it.
Yep, and we're talking about the game like, ooh, it looks like a tile game. Ooh, doo.
Yeah, so we bring it over to the other side of the room, and a guy from Mayfair just appears, and he's like, and
yeah, he's like, you know what the deal is with this game?
And he bestowed his wisdom upon us.
And
also, we kind of needed him because there were 2 sets of T&E in the box, and we would have gotten messed up if he wasn't there.
Yep, plus he taught us how to play the game in the manner that we usually teach other people how to play games. Like the very efficient bam, bam, bam. By the time he's finished speaking, because he has a practice feel, you know the game and you're ready to play.
Yep. So thank you, anonymous Mayfair Games guy. You're awesome. We are T&E fans thanks to you.
And Steve Jackson, if you're listening, we're still up for that game of Puerto Rico.
Yeah, come to Otakon.
Or come to our house.
Even though you live in Texas.
And that was Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geeknights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.